I think we have to understand that the risks nowadays are not only economical, but to a very large extent political, and that's something we have to be mindful and we have to integrate into our investment strategy very simply. And Piotr gave a very good presentation where that featured as a bullet point. But if we look into a little bit more detail into the, and forgive me, you know American politics much better than that, so I let you decide on Mr. Trump. But if we look into Europe in a little bit more detail, it is unquestionable whether this is a coherent entity. I would argue not. And so your analysis will also have to be on a country rather than on a continent level. And it was a little bit veiled, but for example in Poland, well, there are very many nice intelligent people coming up, but the government has taken a significant lurch to the right. And we had attacks on Mr. Soros, which were more based on his Jewish belief rather than on his commercial activity. Something like this doesn't really sit well in a wider democratic environment. Similar things there was a re-Polonization of media, and I don't want to work particularly on Poland because it is just symptomatic rather than being an exponent or the only exponent. You have the same in Hungary. You have a significant movement to the right in France. Le Pen, we're very close to having a significant run at the president's position. In Austria, it was 30,000 votes from having a right-wing president. In Germany, several elections have gone that way. And insofar, to come back to your question, sorry for boring you with all these details about European countries, but it's a very fragmented continent. We don't speak the same language. When you fly 6 hours in one direction, we drive 2 hours other than in England, and we speak 2 or 3 languages on the way, with very proud and distinct cultures and not necessarily willing to go the same way. So there is overall, and in peripheral countries even more, Greece and Spain, a significant movement where the population distances itself from its leadership, and we see this in the elections, and that in itself is not a particularly great process, not only for European integration, but also for doing business with each other and how countries interact. So there's a little bit of a challenge, I would say.
The clear thing that has to happen, which will and must happen at the end of this year, is Britain agrees with the EU what actually happens with this exit and what that exit is and what it means, because that can have later ramifications for the rest of the EU in terms of far-right governments, and it will. I mean, it's a mess. They have to clear it up if they've got any chance of keeping the EU together and keeping that cohesion or even driving that cohesion. Britain moving out may actually accelerate that, or it may accelerate a wider disintegration. But within the UK itself, if you look at where the votes were within the UK, Scotland was strong to remain, Northern Ireland was strong to remain, England and Wales were out, apart from London and the major metros. So Scotland will want to push to remain in the EU. So once they trigger Article 50 and that happens, Scotland will say, well, we actually want to be part of the EU. I mean, there's a 2-year wind down while Britain will still be part of the EU, still free movement of labour, goods, everything else. So by 2019, we'll see a change. We may see Scotland at that point saying, okay, we want to be out. Northern Ireland may say, we want to be out. So by 2020, Gibraltar, yeah, God knows what happens to Gibraltar. I mean, the ramifications, the permutations are huge, but the best case scenario is it actually forces greater integration, but Britain leaves, and maybe Britain stays together. I don't know. It's an absolute open minefield.
It's an interesting point that you make, that a benefit would be greater integration. I just observe what you say. I don't think that a not insignificant part of European citizens probably would not share that statement.
They probably wouldn't, they're not at the minute. Yeah. They will push Article 50 through, and then it may bring a general election forward. in the next couple of years, but it won't happen by the end of this year.
I think it would also be a remarkable state of affairs in one of the oldest and proudest democracies in the world, and I lived there as a very happy non-citizen for 20 years. If they then turned around and said, oh well, we didn't get the election result we wanted, let's try again. I mean, this does not sit very well with a democracy.
I think you get public unrest.
Yes, because then
if they veto it.
Public credibility of politicians globally is at an all-time low. That would go negative, like the interest rates.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the people have spoken. I think it would be pointless, these are all personal opinions by the way, I think it would be pointless having another election built around the result of the referendum. I think we need stability, I think we need leadership. I don't think we need to throw the country back into a sort of election regime where you know, it's potentially very divisive and doesn't give any stability over the next sort of 18 months. So yeah, those are my opinions on that. Regarding the wider sort of issue, I think, you know, now it's very much, the debate's going to move from Britain to the continent with all these minefield events coming up over the next 18 months. I think they've got more of a problem really than Britain has, because if you like, this is all about the EU, and this is all about how far countries give up their sovereignty and how far they integrate into that EU structure. When we signed up in 1973, we signed up to a free trade agreement. The powers that be in Europe are pushing for an ever closer union, so they can create rules and laws that benefit that ever closer union. If that means giving up sovereignty, they can do that for countries. Now, you know, clearly that's not what the UK wants. The UK remains a sovereign state. It has its own democratically elected parliament. It wants to keep that. And I think when the people understand exactly what this strips out to in its basic, simplest form, this is about sovereignty. This is about the UK people having more self-autonomy and determination, not less. And I think if you look at the other European countries, France, Netherlands, Poland, they all want that too. They all want to retain their sovereignty. So this ever closer union needs to re-explore itself and re-examine how far it goes in terms of political and social integration. Fine, let's have a free trade area, that's what we all signed up to, but the rest, you know, is pushing it too far, and that's why we're seeing such a fight back.